Thanks, Corla. Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the key important aspects of the bill, but I'd have to say it's a much watered down version of what we thought would be had, and I think it's in sharp contrast with the legislation which Deputy Wallace published, which was allowed to go to second stage under the bill for an actual genuinely independent Garda authority. And in that bill, what was proposed was that the board and the commissioner would be responsible for the drafting of the code of ethics for the minister to establish by regulation with the approval of the board. And not just that, but that the code of service would be drawn up setting out standards of efficiency and service that the public can expect from the Gardaí. And this is important, obviously, because complaints in that vein cannot presently be made to GSOC. So this is actually a critical section of the bill. It's been in the press releases that you had sent out over a year ago. It was lauded as a great step forward, but as Deputy Wallace said, the Code of Ethics was always there under the 05 Act. It's just successive ministers chose not to actually implement it. And what you're doing now with this pre-existing code, you're saying you will bring it in now, but no disciplinary sanction will be in place for violating it, which makes it utterly ludicrous as far as I'm concerned. Now, the bill now is saying that the authority will draw up a code of ethics that includes standards of conduct, practice for members and internal whistleblowing provisions, but that these will have to be done with a range of bodies such as the unions, and that Deputy Wallace made the point before. Now, given the problems that we've had that have got us to this stage, of the dogs on the streets knowing that we need an independent Garda authority, one of the reasons for that was precisely because of the lack of adequate provision and measures for Garda whistleblowers. Now, as recent as 2 weeks ago at Minister's Questions, Deputy Wallace put these questions to you, Minister, under the so-called new Garda Síochána, with a new minister and a new Garda commissioner, albeit now 18 months old, so not really that new. In actual fact, the treatment of whistleblowers presently is absolutely dire. And I think subsequent to that situation, we've had the position of Garda Keith Harrison vindicated by the state pulling out of a High Court action that it had taken against him at enormous personal and emotional cost, not to mind cost to the taxpayer, of a ludicrous vindictive action, which is worth saying that the judge in that case was the senior counsel during the Morris Tribunal, and it's quite clear that from his stance nothing has really changed in the sense that he sided and awarded full cost to Garda Harrison. And I think this is important, because why are we here discussing a policing authority? It's to have independent scrutiny and accountability of the Gardaí, and unfortunately that is not something that we're getting in the present arrangement. It was very worrying, good and bad, to hear the reports on RTE radio on Sunday, which referenced the fact that subsequent to Deputy Wallace's intervention here with you the last time, when you couldn't say strong enough how great the new Garda regime was, that it actually emerged that the Garda whistleblowers, and the point that he made, that they were being frustrated with information, lack of information being given to that Garda's legal team, that it was only to these matters being raised here that the matter did go onto the, that files were released by the guards and sent to GSOC. So what we have, by the treatment of decent serving guards by senior management at the moment, we have a very clear evidence, indisputable now, of harassment, demonisation and undermining their position. So quite clearly ethics are lacking, and we need a system in place where that will be dealt with properly. We also need to look at the whole area of human rights proofing and so on. And I think it is ridiculous that Minister O'Riordan would go into the Shannon and say, I know now that human rights stuff would be better off with the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. that body, your own watchdog, contributed to this bill, and in their observations, they said that there should be disciplinary sanction and that the role of the authority should be to authorise disciplinary sanction over senior Gardaí. Now, if we don't have this system of ethics established properly, then we have a serious problem there. Now, and I think it would be entirely appropriate for you to comment on the Garda Inspectorate report, which has obviously shocked people and actually vindicated everything that we've said, that nothing has changed inside the ranks of the Gardaí except the faces at the top. And I'm actually surprised that people haven't called for this present Garda Commissioner to resign, because she's standing over a situation that is at least as bad, if not worse, than what former Commissioner Callanan stood over. And the reason why I'm saying it's worse is because the scale of the knowledge that is in the public domain that was there to be addressed has not been addressed. Now, we know from the previous Garda Inspectorate report that they gave a very damning report of Gardaí, for example, massaging the crime figures, which has resulted in those analysis of crime figures have to be withdrawn for a period of time. A very, very serious matter. Well, we know for a fact now that that massaging of the figures is still continuing now. Even as we speak, in the last number of weeks, Superintendent Pat Murray's station in the Midlands and in Athlone, we've seen directly evidence of at least 8 cases where crimes were written down from what the original crime was reclassified as a more minor matter. Clear evidence of massaging of the figures. For example, changing burglaries to criminal damage, reclassification. It's a very, very serious situation, and the Garda Inspectorate were clear that there's a lawlessness out there that is not being addressed, and to do that we need a strong code of ethics that has strong human rights obligations at the centre. And that is not present in this bill. I think it's really regrettable. I mean, there should be, the board should be annually assessing these matters, as well as obviously sanction, because one of the problems would seem to be that the reason why there's such indiscipline at senior levels in the force, which is creating a huge level of demoralisation further down the ranks, is that there's nobody is being called to account for their actions at senior management levels. And the points we've made before about how people get promoted jar very much with the ordinary decent members of the force. So we think this is actually a critical part of the bill. We think what we're getting under this new bill, far from being a beefed up code of ethics, is actually a watering down of a provision that she decided not to enact on before. And it's critical if we are to really reform the thing. And I would like to hear also the Minister comment on the points made by Deputy Wallace about why there is a need to consult with the Garda unions, and indeed, even more curiously, the Minister for Public Expenditure, who I'm not sure his role in human rights proofing of Garda Síochána, or where that actually fits in. But this is getting to the heart of a lot of what we're talking about here. I mean, why are we discussing a Garda Authority bill? Because of the crisis in policing that occurred, and new evidence in the latest Garda Inspectorate report say that those problems are there. I think you know well, Minister, from the fact that the hundreds of cases that landed on your desk, of historic cases of Garda malpractice, how they hadn't been addressed, shows why we need an ethics. And I have to say, in that context, I'm utterly shocked to receive the copy of the letter that you sent to Cynthia Owens, or your office sent to Cynthia Owens today in relation to her case, which was sent to that review mechanism, where that review acknowledged deficiencies in Garda work. And let's see what deficiencies they are. Exhibits, including the DNA on her murdered baby, were destroyed and lost. The internal review mechanism talks about a discredited review that was conducted into her case, a review which ignored and disagreed with the findings of the inquest, which said that she was the mother of baby Noeline. The person who committed that review, that's what your independent review mechanism has relied on, to tell that woman that there's nothing further going to be done in her case. It's utter madness. We've had 2 now independent reviews into her case. Neither of them bothered to interview the woman who was the victim of a paedophile ring, training, which she has alleged involved 3 Gardaí as participants, making it very strange, but relevant that exhibits then later go missing in that case. And she's not even corresponded with. This is a serious problem, and it's not going to go away just because those people have been told their cases are going to go nowhere. These were the reasons why the issue of a policing authority was put centre stage, and they remain. And the measures that you've put forward in this are not going to, sadly, address the behaviour. If those who stand over these practices at the top are still there, well then, why would a middle or lower ranking Garda even bother to try and do their best?